Su Xiao visited Du Chongluan for the 7th time, but Du Chongluan didn't even open the door for her. Unlike the 6th time, when he coldly warned her, "If you come to bother me again, I won't be polite." How impolite could he be? He wasn't a tall and strong man, but rather thin and frail, with a sickly pale complexion. If it came to a fight, Su Xiao was confident she could beat him. As she knocked on the door, she said, "Mr. Du, Liu Bei visited Zhuge Liang 3 times before he succeeded. I've come to see you 7 times. Don't you feel bad about not selling me a painting?" Yes, Mr. Du Chongluan was a painter, and quite a famous one, renowned both domestically and internationally. His paintings were incredibly difficult to obtain, with rumors suggesting that buying one required his personal consent. He recognized people, not money. Obviously, Su Xiao's boss had not earned his recognition. Frankly, Su Xiao's boss was just a nouveau riche with no taste. He wanted to buy Du Chongluan's painting purely to show off. Su Xiao completely understood Du Chongluan. But she couldn't tell her boss, "Mr. Du Chongluan thinks you have no taste and selling you a painting would be a waste." As the chief secretary, she had to believe that there was nothing she couldn't accomplish. She shook her neat short hair and continued knocking. "Mr. Du, I'm very sincere. I know you look down on our boss, but sometimes you have to let your work reach the common folk. Besides, our boss is willing to pay a large sum of." A large bucket of water suddenly poured down from above, drenching Su Xiao completely. Su Xiao wiped the water off her face and looked up just in time to see Du Chongluan's expressionless face flash by the 2nd floor window. His so-called impoliteness was really quite effeminate. Su Xiao gave the now empty 2nd floor the middle finger. The cold water did not extinguish her determination. It was early spring, and the air was still chilly. She shivered, hugging herself as she stood outside the door, continuing to knock. "Mr. Du, I won't leave until you sell me a painting." Du Chongluan ignored her. She leaned against the door and sat down. Her clothes were wet and cold, clinging uncomfortably to her body. She couldn't help sneezing several times. She sat there until 7 in the evening, but Du Chongluan never came to open the door. Her head ached terribly, feeling heavy as if filled with lead, and finally, she blacked out. When she woke up, she was on Du Chongluan's sofa, her wet clothes replaced with a man's shirt, and a thick blanket covering her. She sat up with a scream. "You're awake." Du Chongluan's voice came from the sofa beside her. He handed her a cup of hot water and 2 pills. "You have a bit of a fever. Take the medicine." She looked at him trembling, not taking it. "Did you change my clothes?" "Do you see anyone else here?" he said. "So you saw everything?" Du Chongluan nodded expressionlessly and said, indifferently. "Why didn't you take me to the hospital?" Su Xiao gnashed her teeth. Who could stay so calm after seeing a girl completely exposed? Was her body not good enough? Or did he like men? He should at least say sorry or excuse me. He said blandly, "The driver is on leave, and I can't drive." After a pause, he added, "Take the medicine first." Su Xiao didn't want to mess with her health, so she took the water and pills, swallowing them. The pills were bitter, making her frown slightly and cough gently. Du Chongluan said, "You can sleep here tonight and go back in the morning." "No need." She glanced at the dark night outside and swallowed her refusal, changing it to, "Thank you. Sorry for the trouble." That night, Su Xiao had another fever, feeling like she was on fire, thinking she might die. She staggered into Du Chongluan's bedroom. Hearing the noise, Du Chongluan turned on the light. His first reaction was, "What do you want to do?" Then he saw her unusually red face. Su Xiao grabbed his arm weakly and said, "Take me to the hospital. Can't drive. Call an ambulance." She said it in broken phrases, then collapsed onto him. Du Chongluan, losing his balance, fell to the floor with a thud. "I need to lose weight," Su Xiao thought just before losing consciousness. When she woke up again, she was in the hospital. Du Chongluan, not entirely heartless, stayed by her side the whole time. Seeing her awake, he said blandly, "You've had a fever shot. There's no major issue, and you can be discharged in the afternoon." Su Xiao didn't know what to say. She was usually in good health. A cold or fever would typically resolve with a night's sleep. This time, she had gotten so sick that she needed to go to the hospital, which meant it was serious. Since she was this ill, she couldn't let the opportunity go to waste. She put her hand on her forehead and spoke in a weak voice. With such a high fever, what if it turns into pneumonia? Du Chongluan looked at her coldly. She continued with her feeble act. I heard pneumonia can be fatal if not treated properly. Oh, what have I done to deserve such punishment? Du Chongluan crossed his arms. Miss Su, what exactly are you trying to say? Sell me a painting. Su Xiao looked up at him, her eyes brimming with tears as if they would fall at any moment. I've gone through so much suffering. Just consider it as me buying the painting, not my boss. Okay. Du Chongluan agreed so quickly that Su Xiao was startled and somewhat doubtful. Sure enough, when she was discharged in the afternoon, Du Chongluan brought a painting. She was so happy she almost blew him a kiss. She went home to change clothes and couldn't resist opening the painting to admire it. What she saw left her stunned. Du Chongluan had painted Su Xiao. The background was a rainy day. She was sitting on the steps of a house, hugging her knees, wearing a transparent raincoat. The house was lit from inside, but outside, she was alone. Su Xiao had no artistic talent, but in that moment, it was as if someone had struck her hard in the nose, leaving her eyes filled with tears. She remembered growing up in a poor family, worrying and struggling through her childhood. She remembered the years after graduation, moving to a strange city and working hard to survive. She remembered always keeping a smile in front of others, no matter how difficult things were for her. She remembered that despite the years passing by, she hadn't found the right person. She thought no one could see through her facade, that she hid it well enough. But Du Chongluan had seen through to her heart, to the loneliness she kept hidden. This man, he understood her. Wait, this wasn't the time for sentimentality. She wiped her eyes and laid the painting flat on the table. It seemed there was nowhere suitable for her boss to hang this painting, right? Du Chongluan must have done it on purpose. He had to have done it on purpose. Su Xiao was furious. She had already delayed her work for several days because of this painting, and now he was making things difficult for her at the end. No, she wouldn't give up. She immediately took the painting and hailed a cab to Du's house. Why are you here again? Du Chongluan was visibly unhappy to see her. Holding the painting, she said, Did you do this on purpose? Any random landscape would have sufficed. Why did you paint me? Because I wanted to. Su Xiao was taken aback, her tone softening. Can I exchange it for another? No. Du Chongluan was about to close the door, but Su Xiao quickly squeezed in, her big eyes pleading, Please. It's not impossible. Du Chongluan touched his nose, and Su Xiao was overjoyed, not expecting there to be room for negotiation. Unless you become my driver for half a month. Becoming a driver for half a month, this was Du Chongluan's condition. Not a harsh one at all, Su Xiao agreed immediately. She explained the situation to her boss, who without hesitation granted her a paid half-month leave. Su Xiao thought her boss would probably even agree to trade her for one of Du Chongluan's paintings if necessary. Will I get paid for being your driver? Su Xiao asked Du Chongluan eagerly on her first day as a part-time driver. Du Chongluan didn't even look at her, coldly saying, What do you think? It seemed unlikely. Du Chongluan wanted to go to the countryside to sketch, a place full of wildflowers and weeds. He specified that they had to arrive before sunset. It was already past 3 p.m., so Su Xiao calculated the time and drove fast. The countryside breeze, carrying a fresh floral scent, blew through the window as she hummed happily. Suddenly, she heard Du Chongluan's anxious voice, Stop the car. Stop the car. She braked immediately and Du Chongluan rushed out, vomiting. Car sick? She was stunned, quickly finding a bottle of water and a pack of tissues to bring to him. Are you car sick? You were driving too fast. Du Chongluan blamed her entirely. I had to drive fast to reach the destination before sunset. That's your problem. Su Xiao resisted the urge to hit him. After they got back in the car, she changed the route to take a shortcut. However, luck was not on their side. After half an hour of bumping along, the car broke down. Du Chongluan looked at her. I don't think we'll make it before sunset, he sighed. Forget it, call a tow truck. Su Xiao thought, if it weren't for your sissy car sickness, we'd have been there already. She smiled. No need for a tow truck. I can fix it. Let me check. It turned out to be a minor issue. She opened the hood, tinkered a bit, and the car started again. See, am I impressive? She turned to grin at Du Chongluan in the back seat, looking proud. Du Chongluan's expression was a bit strange, hard to describe. He asked lightly, why does a girl like you know how to fix cars? She shrugged, half jokingly, half seriously. I force myself to learn. No one cares for me, and when problems arise, I don't know who to ask for help, so I had to learn a bit of everything. Du Chongluan looked at her, his eyes filled with an unnamed emotion, remaining silent for a long time. Her heart pounded, unsure why it suddenly beat so fast. They locked eyes, and after a long moment, she understood his look. It was pity. He pitied her. She felt greatly humiliated, quickly turning her head, biting her lip. Du Chongluan said softly, your white shirt is dirty. That day they didn't go sketching. Instead, Du Chongluan had her drive back to a large mall in the city, where he bought her a new white shirt. It's too expensive. I can't accept it. Su Xiao looked at the price tag, feeling her heart bleed. What kind of fabric was this? It cost nearly as much as her monthly salary. Take it if I'm giving it to you. Du Chongluan ordered, his hands in his pockets, leaving no room for argument. Su Xiao asked quietly, can you convert it to cash for me? Du Chongluan's icy glare shut her up, and she mimed zipping her lips. While driving Du Chongluan home, Su Xiao said, thank you, You're the first guy to give me a gift. It's not a gift, it's compensation. Du Chongluan corrected. Su Xiao smiled. To me, it's a gift. Su Xiao cherished the white shirt so much that she was reluctant to wear it, fearing that washing it too often would change it. She wasn't sure if her fondness was because of the shirt's high price or because of the person who gave it to her. Du Chongluan, she repeated his name silently. This cold man made her feel warm. Although he always appeared indifferent, he seemed like an angel to her. As a mere mortal, all she could do was repeat his name a few more times. Su Xiao was not unrealistic. Once she recognized reality, she wouldn't linger on it. Knowing that it was impossible with Du Chongluan, she suppressed her feelings, refusing to think about or dwell on them. In the following days, no matter where Du Chongluan went, she played the role of a driver impeccably. She could have won an annual Best Driver award. But Du Chongluan often stirred her emotions. Forgive her for using the word stir, because Du Chongluan made her uneasy. For example, when taking him to the supermarket, he would ask Su Xiao to accompany him. He would even decide to pick out various household items for her, things she rarely used. She told Du Chongluan, I'm just a tomboy. Don't treat me like an ordinary girl. I don't need these things. Du Chongluan glanced at her. To me, you're just an ordinary girl. When taking him to art exhibitions, he would drag her along, claiming, to improve your taste. Since her school days, Su Xiao had been busy making a living. While other kids learned ballet, painting, and piano, she worked part-time jobs wherever she could make money. Upon graduating from university, it was another new struggle in life. She had always spun like a top, and standing in front of a painting for a long time was a luxury she had never known. Du Chongluan asked her, which painting do you think is the best? Didn't you say I have no taste? How would I know? Su Xiao retorted, in your tasteless opinion, which painting is the best? Su Xiao randomly pointed to a landscape painting, that one. Du Chongluan smiled slightly. You have an eye for it. It was one of his works. Su Xiao was stunned for a long time. Du Chongluan smiled. He actually smiled. An ancient poem said, a smile can topple a city, another smile can topple a country. Describing Du Chongluan couldn't be more fitting. It was a pity she didn't take a photo to post on Weibo. When taking him to a cafe to pass the time, he insisted she sit beside him. Those moments were beautiful. The rich aroma of coffee lingered around. The warm afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows, serene and comforting, and the person she liked was right beside her. She had never imagined such a scene. Fortunately, it was only for half a month. If it lasted any longer, Su Xiao feared she wouldn't be able to resist pouncing on Du Chongluan. Du Chongluan seemed oblivious to her feelings. Of course, angels are pure. He certainly wouldn't know how much she longed to hold him. When his driver returned, Du Chongluan gave Su Xiao a painting as promised. She carefully examined it in front of him. It was an ordinary landscape painting. She felt relieved. Su Xiao never expected Du Chongluan to call her again. She held the phone for a while, thinking she had seen it wrong. Du Chongluan said, "Su Xiao, my gardener is on leave. Do you want to come over as a part-time gardener?" Su Xiao was stunned for a long time before she said, "I don't have time. I have to work. I already talked to your boss. He gave you a month's paid leave, and I'll give him another painting." Du Chongluan's voice had a hint of cheerful amusement. Why did she feel so flattered? Su Xiao was dazed, her throat tight, not knowing what to say. She actually wanted to refuse. The longer she stayed by his side, the deeper she fell. But she couldn't bear to refuse. She went to the bookstore and bought books on gardening, cramming for 2 nights. The next day, she shamelessly asked Du Chongluan again, "Is there a salary?" This time, he didn't disdain her, just nodded slightly. Yes. Nothing motivates Su Xiao more than money. She instantly revived, with a small shovel in her left hand and large scissors in her right, striding into the garden. The ideal was beautiful, but reality was harsh. After a few days, Su Xiao managed to kill one of Du Chongluan's very precious flowers. She meekly confessed to Du Chongluan, who casually said, "Do you know that flower was very expensive? You didn't just kill a flower, you wasted a lot of money." She hung her head without speaking, and Du Chongluan continued, "I'll give you an 80% discount, but you still owe this much." He named a figure, and Su Xiao immediately jumped up. When it came to money, she wasn't so easygoing. "How can you make me pay for this? How is this my fault? You knew I didn't know anything about gardening but still asked me to come over as a part-timer. You should have been prepared for dead plants. I couldn't figure out why you asked me to be a part-time gardener before, but now I understand. You just wanted to torture me. You enjoy bossing me around, trampling on me, treating me like a servant to satisfy your twisted mind." Su Xiao, in her fury to protect her money, almost spoke without thinking. Du Chongluan stood up with a, "Huh," his face livid. "Is that what you think of me? What do you mean by bossing you around and trampling on you? When have I ever treated you like a servant? You women are really..." He rarely got so agitated. Although he was cold, he had always been emotionally calm. Suddenly seeing him so emotional, Su Xiao felt sheepish and didn't know what to say. Why did she feel guilty? I... Facing Du Chongluan, Su Xiao was just a paper tiger. I was just guessing. Otherwise, why would you inexplicably ask me to be a part-time gardener? That's because... He seemed to muster a lot of strength, as if the words were dragged out from deep within his heart, carrying a force that was both thrilling and intense. "Because I want to see you." Su Xiao was completely stunned, her body suddenly feeling unsteady, so she had to sit down on the sofa. Did he know what he was saying? Did he understand the meaning of those words? "Su Xiao, am I falling for you?" Du Chongluan continued to ask. Su Xiao remained dazed. The person she liked was asking her, "Am I falling for you?" How should she respond? How could an angel like a mortal? She looked up at him. He was looking at her, his face filled with confusion, annoyance, and anticipation. She thought she should hold her ground at this moment, so she said, "Stop changing the subject. I'm telling you, I won't pay." Su Xiao always thought Du Chongluan had a low emotional intelligence. For example, he hadn't contacted her since that day. This made Su Xiao wonder if she had overdone it. She felt a bit inferior to Du Chongluan, but once there was a glimmer of hope, she didn't want to give up easily. If it was just her one-sided love, she could hide it forever. But since Du Chongluan liked her too, why shouldn't she go after it? She found an excuse to visit the Du residence. The door was opened by a young woman with long curly hair and a fashionable outfit. The woman looked at Su Xiao, who was carrying a hoe, in surprise. After a while, she asked, Who are you looking for? Su Xiao was even more shocked and quickly assessed the woman's identity in her mind. Cook, gardener, driver, nanny, rival. She took the hoe off her shoulder and smiled gently. I'm looking for Mr. Du Chongluan. Is he here? He's changing clothes. Please come in. Changing clothes? Su Xiao's heart skipped a beat. What had they been doing? She sat on the sofa, resting the hoe by her leg, and unfriendly looked around. The woman, unsure of Su Xiao's identity, cautiously poured her a glass of water and then sat down on a chair a meter away, quietly observing her. After a while, Du Chongluan came downstairs. Seeing Su Xiao, he was very surprised and asked, "Why are you here?" Su Xiao tried to keep her tone soft. "I killed your flower. Although it wasn't my fault, I still wanted to do something, so I bought this luxury hoe to give you." Du Chongluan almost had 3 black lines drop from his forehead. He said calmly, just leave it there. Thanks. That was it. How could someone with whom he had an emotional entanglement be so calm and say just a few words? Su Xiao felt something clogging her chest, making her feel incredibly uncomfortable. She stood up, looking at Du Chongluan, and he looked back at her with no emotion in his eyes, so indifferent that it made her furious. Yes, this was him, distant and cold. She smiled bitterly. I'm leaving. Goodbye. Even as she walked out the door, Du Chongluan didn't say another word. Su Xiao felt more miserable than when her boss had delayed her salary for a month. But fortunately, she hadn't told him that day. Yes, that's love, and I love you too. After that, they didn't see each other again. They belonged to different worlds, and with Su Xiao deliberately avoiding him, it was likely they would never meet again. Time could take away all pain, and 2 years passed in a flash. Su Xiao was now the vice president of her company, decisive and no longer the naive girl she once was. She had a boyfriend now, young and promising, and treated her well. They were planning to get married next year. Su Xiao's bedroom still had the self-portrait Du Chongluan had given her hanging on the wall. She told her boyfriend, "This is painted by Du Chongluan. It's worth a lot." Her boyfriend chuckled. "Yeah, right. How could you know someone like him?" Indeed, even she found it hard to believe. A person like her, struggling in the mundane world, had once had a connection with someone as angelic as him. The words, "Su Xiao, have I fallen for you?" echoed like a hallucination, often appearing in her dreams. On a sunny afternoon, Su Xiao received an invitation, a letter inviting her to an art exhibition by Mr. Du Chongluan. The inviter's name was Miss Chen Wanqing. The face of the young woman she had seen at Du's residence that day flashed before her eyes. Was it her? Had she become his spokesperson? Half an hour before the exhibition started, Su Xiao's thoughts grew increasingly chaotic. Finally, she dropped her work and drove to the gallery. There were more people than she had expected. She raised her eyes to the paintings on the wall, scanning them quickly, and to her surprise, many of them were self-portraits of her. They had been altered so that others couldn't recognize her, but anyone who knew her well could see it at a glance. In an instant, her mind went blank, her heart constricted, and she couldn't breathe. It felt as if the world contained only her and those paintings. She didn't know how much time had passed before someone gently called her name, Su Xiao, Su Xiao. She looked at the person. Chen Wanqing? Chen Wanqing nodded. Su Xiao asked again, "Why haven't I seen Du Chongluan?" Chen Wanqing looked at her, sadness in her eyes, and said, "He died 6 months ago. These are his posthumous works." Su Xiao's eyes widened, her mouth half open, unable to speak. He had heart disease since he was a child. I was his attending physician. Su Xiao stared blankly at the paintings on the wall, her eyes red and her throat tight. This outcome was something she had never imagined. She had always thought he was living well, wielding his paintbrush and creating freely. How could someone like him die? How could heaven be so cruel as to let him die? "Miss Su, Chongluan left a letter for you." Chen Wanqing handed her a white envelope. She walked to a quiet corner and opened the letter. "Su Xiao, by the time you read this letter, I will have already left this world. I never told you, but I had heart disease. To manage my condition, I tried to keep my emotions steady, neither joyful nor angry, neither sad nor hurt, as indifferent as you saw me. Su Xiao recalled his frail body, pale skin, and often expressionless face. Her heart felt like it had been pricked by a needle, so painful. Do you know? No one has ever clung to me like you did. I kept telling you to leave, but inside, I was afraid you would really give up. When I saw the loneliness in you, it was like seeing myself. When you said no one cared about you, I wished so much for you to lean on my shoulder. I didn't know how to express my feelings, so I used clumsy methods to keep you by my side. Su Xiao's tears dripped onto the letter, blurring the words. That day, I tentatively asked if I liked you, and you avoided the topic. Yes, someone as reclusive and difficult as me, it's impossible for you to like me. But fortunately, you didn't like me, or my death would have made you very sad. Su Xiao bit her lip hard, her body trembling. In my final days, I kept painting you, as if you were by my side. Do you know what I took with me to the grave? Haha, it was that luxury hoe. You never guessed, did you? No, I didn't guess. You won. Su Xiao, I'm gone. You have to live happily. Don't ever say no one loves you again. Du Chongluan, will always love you, even in death. Su Xiao couldn't hold back anymore. She crouched down, burying her head in her knees, and wept bitterly.